Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
Hello, listeners. I'm Mabel and the host for this Spot On podcast episode, where we feature top restaurateurs, investors, and business leaders. This is part of our Spot On series. Spot On has the best-in-class payment platform for retail, and they have a flagship solution called Spot On Restaurant, where they combine marketing, software, and payments all into one. They have served everyone from large chains like Dairy Queen and Subway to small mom-and-pop restaurants. To learn more, go to spoton.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help B2B businesses get return on investment, clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships through custom done-for-you podcast. If you have a B2B business and want to build a great relationship with clients, referral partners, and thought leaders in your space, there's no better way to do it than through podcast and content marketing. To learn more, go to rise25media.com or email us at support@rise25media.com. Today's guest on the podcast is David Dittenber. David is a longtime restaurant operator who, together with his partner, founded BYOD, which stands for Bring Your Own Data. They create easy-to-use digital tools to improve operations and enhance customer experience. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks for having me, Bella.
Sure. So you have a long, varied background. You've done a lot of different things. So my first question for you is, if you're at a social event, a non-work related social event, and you get introduced to someone, and after that introduction, they say to you, "Oh, very nice to meet you, David. What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
You know, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, from my years of operator restaurant experience, I usually get introduced as a restaurateur that's now an entrepreneur, right? And so my background is mostly, like I said, operations. I started in a dish pit in a little restaurant in a town called Augrey, Michigan, when I was 12 years old, right? So I'm still an operator by heart, but I think that, you know, my parents and the family, they were all entrepreneurs and had their own business. So I always had a little bit of that entrepreneurial blood in my veins also. So I would, operator, but entrepreneur, I guess, would be the short answer. But, you know, that I think that could go in different directions based on who the audience is.
Yeah. So were you one of those kids with entrepreneurship sort of in your family? Did you work in the family businesses, or, you know, did you have a newspaper route and mow lawns and do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I started, I tell people that I started, I think I was born with a shovel in my hand, right? Like my family they were mostly farmers and, you know, did a lot of outside work, you know, and so then my mom was a seamstress. My dad was a truck driver. So, you know, pretty common, you know, all American kind of family, right? And so most of the family, they were either in the farm. So we do a lot of stuff that would revolve around that type of work. But I'd work in my mom's business. She'd have myself and my brother trucking around things in the summer, you know, dragging her stuff around. But that led me to kind of working with some of the entrepreneurs in this small town, right? The people that were, you know, the restaurateurs or had that type of kind of graduated from, you know, family business into that next kind of, I don't know, you know, that next job, if you will. And that, I think, kind of inspired me, being around those people that, you know, that was their life, right? They got up every morning, they worked hard, they you know, they went to the shop, they went to the grocery store, they counted the money, and they were mowing the lawn, right? And so, you know, I always had that kind of small business bug from, you know, early and then into kind of my early influencers of work. So
yeah, you know, those little small rural towns, I think, are really great from an entrepreneurship perspective, because they're not company towns. There is no one big employer that everybody goes to work for. So if you're going to hang around, you sort of end up starting your own business or working in a small business and learning about all those aspects of it. So I think it's a great place to kind of get that type of experience. And sounds like that's what you got.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I was with a couple of mentors of mine that we have breakfast with everyone. One's a healthcare administrator and one is he started a construction company, and we talk a lot about it. I was just initially reaching out to them to talk a little bit about how can I grow professionally and how can I do things, and come to find out they grew up in very similar backgrounds, one-room schoolhouses, and I think my graduating class was 23 people, and it's just interesting to see that that small town mentality, and again, a lot of it has to do with the work ethic and things like that. You just don't know any different, right? Like It's not like we grew up with anything other than, hey, this is what we're going to do. So it's just interesting to hear, even people that are now in their 80s, that's a similar experience where I thought that this was, I thought growing up that coming from a small town was almost a disadvantage, right? That it was very difficult. But the reality is, I think some of those work ethics and things that come out of that background in the smaller settings, I think you're right. It gives you a little bit more exposure to things that maybe you wouldn't get in a more populated area.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about BYOD.
Yeah, BYOD. It's so a virtual restaurant assistant. Her name is Mabel. Mabel is kind of the delivery person, if you will, and she's based off a longtime manager that worked for me. Her name was Rose. And kind of we call Mabel the person that makes sure that things don't fall through the cracks. So so the idea is that we have so many different, I remember being in restaurants in the mid 90s where point of sale were just starting to be introduced. And that was going to be the saving grace, right, of that digital evolution going from tickets to digital. Fast forward 20 some odd years or 30 years. And now all of a sudden we had 30 different, platforms at one point between payment and operations. And the reality was they were all disparaging, right? So BYOD, the idea was bring your own data. Each restaurant footprint has its own, operations software, reservation software, point of sale. We wanted the owner to be able to bring that data in and then be able to use it. What we do a little bit differently versus, we're kind of an anti-dashboard company, if you will. So the way that the data comes into BYOD and then Mabel delivers it to the managers in real time. So we're not waiting till that P&L meeting at the next month or 6 weeks later. We're trying to make those decisions in operations as they happen interventionally versus kind of letting them stack up. So the theory is that, you save time, you save money by having things that don't fall through the cracks and are dealt with in the moment. And that's kind of that whole, utilization of machine learning and artificial intelligence in a practical way to be able to do some of those things.
Yeah. Can you give an example of one of those instances?
Yeah, for sure. So you have a schedule, right? Everybody, I grew up and I've seen restaurants that go anywhere between a fancy scheduling program to it written on the back of one of those napkins, or placeholders. The schedule comes up, you've got the shift happening. Let's say it starts to snow and rain and sleet and the business isn't what it's supposed to do. If the manager keeps on a full staff when it's not needed, right, or keeps them through the end, that's a problem, right? You're going to run high labor costs. So what Mabel would do is she would take that schedule, she'd compare it towards what's happening in the business. She'd send an alert to the manager to say, hey, server Bela is not busy. Bela can go home, right? And so that then keeps the operations going. Everything happens real time in the moment. Another example would be like a health-related concern. Romaine lettuce gets recalled by the FDA. We get a lot of those communications, whether it be through email or alert from our food company. But if that's in an email box someplace and somebody doesn't see that, so what happens is we have Mabel actually reading the emails and things like that would come in and send a message immediately to the manager to say, take romaine, take Caesar salads off the menu, right? Because we just had a product recall. So, not just, operational savings, but all, operational concerns that would go on via a manager kind of in the moment, right? Same kind of thing with reviews and that kind of thing.
Wow. Excellent. So talk a little bit about, let's say I run a restaurant. I run a small, we do breakfast and lunch.
Yep.
And, I'm the cook. my wife's, works behind the counter, and we have a couple of wait staff and some other food prep people in the back. How do I so I'm interested in this. Tell me what it takes for me to roll this into my restaurant. What's involved?
Sure. And that was one of the things coming from operations. I've had so many tools that were pushed, from top down, right?
Yeah.
Technologists deriving technology, but didn't really, working with people in the trenches. So I want something that would have been easy to adopt and easy to integrate. So we actually can integrate with anything that the restaurant has in place, right? We also do some things with video cameras, right? So, your video cameras, your already existing hardware, we built it in a way that the data streams are just coming into BYOD agnostically, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to comply with any changeover and, that kind of thing in order to get it to work. The machine learning piece of it, the more data that Mabel gets over time, the better she'll get at predicting things about your restaurant. But, that really is the only thing that kind of develops over time. You're right, that the rest of it is immediate. It's very quick to install. Essentially, we plug into the point of sale. We either plug into the initial or the scheduling application or whatever that you have right now, and you're off to the races, seeing kind of immediate results and immediate alerting, within hours of inception of the program.
Wow. And so what's sort of I imagine with a lot of products, there's sort of a sweet spot from a size perspective, right? These restaurants are a little too small. These operations are a little too big, or they already have some sophisticated systems that they're using. So you're not going to displace that. What's sort of the sweet spot for you guys?
Sure. Our ideal customer is kind of what we refer to as mid-market or enterprise. So that's where, most of the scalability, a lot of them are the same technology foundations, right? So it's easy to just kind of go from one to the next. So that equates to a restaurant that's, $2 million in up in receipts, as well as, a group that is anywhere between 5 and 50, right? But we've been doing a lot more on the enterprise side just because of the conglomeration, right? There's a lot more groups out there, buying multi-unit franchisees and so forth. So we've had to adjust that. And that's really what we've been doing over the last 6 months, is really making sure that we have a scalable model for big operations, right? That, 100 to 500 or more, right? So that's where, and again, if you look at kind of the alignment of the industry, a quarter point of $500 million in sales is a big deal if you can go in there and save that, versus a quarter point of that mom and pop restaurant, right? And again, growing up in that independent environment, this would be it's a tougher sell to kind of that old school operator. And I would still consider myself an old school operator. But, we've talked so much about technology and all these other platforms like third party and so forth. I believe for the success of the independent also, they need to see past, kind of the way we've always done things and look into how technology can help them be more profitable and more efficient. So I don't ever want to say I wouldn't want to do that, because that's truly where I grew, kind of grew my roots, if you will. But it's definitely a harder sell in that onesie twosie market, just for the reasons that you kind of talk about, right?
Sure.
I think the other thing that you have to have, Bela, is you have to have somebody that's a little bit more digital forward. Companies like Spot On are great to work with, they're great to integrate with, and they're truly, in my opinion, going out and creating products that allow the owners to, have more access to their data and allow them to use it, right? So they're an integration partner with us, and I love kind of those forward-thinking people that can also, but what's interesting is those same independents that didn't want to change over to things like cloud-based point of sale, you see that starting to happen. So we know that even in those instances, if they're a little lagging with regard to adoption, they'll ultimately get there because we see that technology upgrade on that side, which is a great thing for the industry, especially for the independent, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, with any new technology, there's the early adopters, right? Then there's the crowd, and
Right.
then there's the late to the show people. But eventually, everyone gets there if it's a good piece of technology. Yeah.
Right.
So that brings up an interesting point. How do you sell this product? Right? Do you use direct salespeople? Do you have distributors? How does your sales channel work?
Sure. We just started. We've been in development now for the better part of 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the last 3 months was our first commercial launch. We did some small tool launching, if you will, kind of through COVID, things like contact tracing and things like that to help make the platform a little bit more robust. But we've been working in partnerships with the state restaurant associations, Michigan, Florida, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Ohio, to name a few. And so kind of working through their association members. We've also worked with, some other industry partners like DirecTV for Business, right? So we've been kind of utilizing their sales channels to get our inflow of business, which has worked out really well for us. And the best part is we can show value to already existing customers versus trying to just go out there and say, hey, look at us, right? Which is, as very difficult to kind of grow a product from the ground up. So we've been trying to use those existing channels and B2B partnerships. I think you mentioned it. Companies that we're working on a thing right now. One's called Certistar, which is a food allergy company. We've worked with, like I said, Spot On and others to be able, because those sales channels that are already existing, I think what you were kind of saying is the validation of another line is the true way. And again, those late adopters usually, when you talk about them, they're usually very pragmatic. They just want to see the results and make sure it works. Right. So I think that B2B model is really, whether it be through association or industry partners or, just other companies that are like-minded like us, I think are very important to that growth.
Yeah. Have you guys gotten to the point where you do some direct advertising or you go to trade shows, or those types of things?
Yeah, we have. And again, a lot of our lead into commercialization, we were out there just getting the word out. So, the National Restaurant Association shows, some of the state association shows and regional shows. We're doing some regional stuff here in Michigan and then around in Florida, which are really successful for us. Some of the member mixers and things like that, definitely. In the end, the restaurant industry is all based on hospitality. So they need to see you, right? And we need to be able to kind of tell that story that we're operators. We're not just a technology company. So a lot of that you need to be seen. But on the other side of it, we really, through those association channels and some of those other partners, that's where the majority of the business. So it's good for us because we can deal directly one-on-one with people and their needs also versus kind of that blanket, because you start saying machine learning and artificial intelligence, and frankly, with all the buzz going on right now, it tends to get lost a little bit, right? Or people get a little freaked out by it. So it's important to be able to be at the places where you can see and talk to people, just pushing that message out.
Yeah. So if I'm a small to medium sized restaurateur, would I typically have sort of somebody on my staff, or maybe it's me that's sort of the technology person? Because it just seems to me, I think back, 30 years, the wait staff wrote the order down on a piece of paper. They took it, they handed it through the window, someone picked it up, they cooked it, and out it came. And that was it. And now everything's computerized. And so there's just all, inventory control, as you said, reservations, all that kind of stuff is just all technology based. So would I have, and it seems like I have to have somebody who's at least the first level troubleshooter for me, because if something goes down, I'm like out of business. I can't take orders.
Yeah, and so, it's a really, and I think even post pandemic, it became more difficult for that regional operational person, right? Especially in a multi-unit that they're trying to cover let's say 8 to 10 restaurants, even from that side of it, right? So you've got, in bigger groups, you might have 5 regionals, reporting up to a director of operations. So, every client is different, right? And how they handle that, because you've got, kind of the chief technology officer, or some of this even would go into the security officer right at the top level. But at the operations level, you have to, you have to have the people that understand that what you're trying to do is help them run their operations better. So, the true proof in the pudding, in my opinion, is around those operational people, right? And then usually that leads you back to a director of ops that's trying to solve some problem, whether it be, hey, my labor's too high, hey, my food cost is too high, my communication across, kind of the regions aren't where it needs to be, that sort of thing. So, and again, being a startup, we've had to kind of go smaller than bigger to start, right? We've had to go in and prove, in some betas and things like that with the regionals, that we could indeed solve their problems. And more importantly, it's as easy as we say it is to get it up and running, because the number one reason that an operations person or even a C-level person is going to be apprehensive about new technology is just the time and the adoption rate, right? And so it's not really the money, right? And we've got a good case in terms of ROI, what we can save and what we can make them, and then what we can just save them, because we do have all the tools kind of integrated that come for free with our platform. But at the end of the day, their biggest challenge is, where's the time going to come from?
Right.
This, right? And so I think that's been the challenge wherever you're going to enter at, whether it be, C-level or operations or kind of that operations lead. You have to prove to them that this isn't going to be like, hey, we're going to sacrifice our guest experience to go in for a new technology platform, because they've done that so many times, and it's just, it's detrimental to the guest, right? And that's what we're all here for. We're here to make sure that the guest has a good experience.
Yeah. Excellent point. And anyone who's been around for a while, they've had some not so great experiences with adopting new things. They haven't worked out like they wanted them. Either the staff hates it, or the customers hate it, or it doesn't deliver, or what if it doesn't? And some of these are really critical to your operation, right? If they go down, your restaurant's closed. You can't function. Right. So some of these things are really, really important. So people are cautious after they have some experience. They get very cautious, I think, and rightly so. So I think that's one of the big challenges for any entrepreneur starting a new business is sort of getting that confidence and being able to convince the new potential customer that, yes, indeed, you can rely on us. Yeah, I know we're a small company, but we're focused on this to making sure it works for you.
Yeah, and what this a little bit of the backstory just quickly is, on that note, I was an operator, but I went and made sure that we, from a technology standpoint, went and had people that understood what we were trying to do at a much higher level. So we were lucky, being from Midland, Michigan, to have a bunch of really smart data architects and so forth, with Dow Chemical being here. And these were guys that did, this type of integration with people like SAP, or if they didn't do things correctly at the right times, chemical plants were going to blow up, right? So we wanted to make, so again, it was all about trying to utilize technology to make something that would do exactly what you just talked about, have a really small imprint in terms of what they had to change. Let's adapt to their operations versus making, their operations adapt to technology. And so it's a trust factor. And I think, again, artificial intelligence and machine learning is this big buzzword right now, but people have been burnt by it before, right? Automation and all these really sexy, cool words. And then all of a sudden, after a few years, it goes by the wayside because they try to do too much. And we wanted to do something that was practical, simple, and affordable, that utilized the technology in the right way, that could really, show difference and have influence versus, oh my God, I'm going to have robots running around the restaurant, right? That's So that's kind of practical, simple, cheap. I always say affordable, but I'm more in the cheap realm, right? Being an operator, right? So
excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of starting this business from an entrepreneurial perspective. So like, what were some of your sort of big challenges in the early days?
Just coming from a person who had done multiple LLCs and multiple businesses, and I felt like I had a pretty good handle on, kind of the aspects that you needed to run business, whether it was liability management, insurance, accounting, all that type of stuff. But startups it's a different animal, right? And we were self-funded for the majority of our journey up until about 6-8 months ago. And I didn't know anything about convertible debt and, safes and all that type of stuff. So there were a lot of things on that side that we really needed to get good representation around us that had been there and done that, almost like we did with the technology. Let's not go out there and reinvent something. Let's go to someone who has done this before, knows where the pitfalls are. And I still want to, put an asterisk behind that. It still doesn't mean these businesses will be successful. You can do everything right, and it's a very difficult process. But we surrounded ourselves with a good team of people. And then, like I said earlier, I'm big in a mentor network, and we've been really lucky to have people that, whether it be from big business or, just people that can give you that insight to make sure that you're, and so we have a really great advisory board. I think the challenge was coming up with the advisory board and the people that can challenge you to stay and move in the right path, right? Versus, being in it. I think that the other thing that is it would be very easy to say, as an operator, I'm so in love with the solution. And not that you're not passionate about the solution, but sometimes you need to adjust those paths based on what the market and what the customer needs, right? And so those are a lot of things that people would advise us on, to be like, let's continue to move forward in those areas. So that was a lot of the challenge, just really kind of wrapping your hands and head around all those things and getting them to work together. Plus, just, realizing how difficult it is to get in front of people, to validate yourself in a market that's frankly dog eat dog. Technology is a different animal, right? And so you need to, those were some of the things that were challenging and continue to be challenging, right? They're ever changing.
Yeah. Excellent. At Rise 25 here, we're sort of big fans at publicly acknowledging people who've sort of been influential in our lives and have helped us. Is there anyone you want to give a kind of a shout out to that's helped you along the way and been really influential?
I have a few, and then a few. And the first one, it was an early mentor of mine. His name was John Lord. John was a former healthcare executive that moved into town, into Bay City, where my first restaurant was. And John was a guy that had a network, and you had to earn that trust and the ability that he would, that you weren't going to go embarrass him. But he was really great at kind of preparing me for some of these situations that you really, you can't simulate, right? You can read about them, but you need to be around executives and people that have been there in order. And John was really great and introduced me to some great people, like some people locally here that I respect. Dave Kepler, who's the former CIO of Dow Chemical, and then one of our lead investors is Andrew Liveris, who's the former CEO of Dow Chemical, and Andrew just retired. So just being able to be around people like that, right? That you just, and they introduce you to other people within networks that just are. It's almost surreal sometime coming from that town that I talked about. Sitting in some of these places that we, just grateful to be able to have some of those great influences around us. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. Thanks for doing that. It was very good. So where's a good place for if listeners want to find out more about you guys? Where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, the two best places are our website, BYOD.ai, and then LinkedIn is just BYOD. And both of those, you can go schedule a demo. We have some informational videos that we have on there that kind of go through the integrations and, kind of trying to simplify it a little bit. So all the information on those two sites.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure that all that information is in the show notes for our listeners. And so is there something that I have not asked you that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I think, the last point that you were talking about in terms of, people that are influential, I just think that whether any of the talks that I do or anybody that I'm around, I just encourage people to reach out, right? They think that there are not opportunities but with groups like Rise 25 and there is a robust network of people that have been there and done that, and people that are in these industries. I just really, encourage the young entrepreneurs to reach out to anyone that they feel. And what's the worst that can happen? They're going to tell you no, or they don't have time for you. But,
right.
And if you do get that opportunity, you want to make sure that you're prepared, because there's nothing worse than showing up at a C-level meeting and acting like you've never, you've not done any preparation. So
right.
Yeah, that would be it. I love the concept behind Rise, and I've listened to a couple of the other podcasts. I love what you guys do.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks. That was a great way to close this podcast out. David, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me as well. Thanks for having me, Bale. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.